So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Act 46 information hearing for Dover. Rich is going to start with some opening remarks, and we're going to have a question and answer period later.
Thank you, everybody. We've got a technological glitch out back. Everybody wave to Selena. So she's trying to get something up on the board. So we're here. How many of you were at the last Dover Act 46 committee meeting in Dover? Okay, so we got some new faces. What we're going to be doing is we have a 4-part presentation, 3-part presentation. I forget. 4. I'm sorry. 4-part presentation.
How many times you gone through this?
Yeah, this is only last time.
We're going to, after each part of the presentation, we hand you out a piece of paper so you can write questions down. The reason we're doing this is some people don't like to speak. Also, those, if you look over there, we're not supposed to know he's there, but that's Richard. And he works for Wardsboro Community Cable Television, so you'll all be famous, you'll be on TV, and some people don't like to do that. So if you feel embarrassed, you can write a question down. We were also doing it because we were taking all the questions at the end of the meeting, and we were answering all the questions because sometimes you didn't have time. Marlboro's been very well represented. I think their first meeting had 60 people, 70 people there. So we were trying to get answers on the website. We'll give you a website to go to that has all the other questions that were answered. So if you have other questions, or you can see what other discussions have been from other meetings. We did see that a lot of the questions were the same. We're going to go down and introduce everybody who's here from the committee. Most of you in Dover know me. I'm Rich Werner. I've been school board chair for a little while, and I chaired this committee. And we'll go this way and then back around.
Dan MacArthur from Marlboro, member of the study committee, and a member of the Marlboro School Board as well. Chip Feckery from the Dover School Board.
Randy Capitani from Dover.
Mike Murphy from Wardsboro.
Lucy Grotwick from Marlboro.
Dwight Borum, Wardsboro.
And in the back we have,
Selena Romo, Marlboro.
and next to her is Rita, who's been helping us with the publicity. We've had a website up and we've had a bunch of information going out through the internet. So are you ready to start, or do we want to?
I'm going to start walking through some of the things because the internet is being really, really slow, and there's something wrong with the website that I used to develop the presentation. It's not really, so that's why I'm having technical difficulties.
If everybody else turns off their Wi-Fi, will it help you?
I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to go without the video for a little bit.
Yeah, because it's telling me now that I have 8 minutes to download it.
Okay, so we start off with
I'm confused.
we start off with educational opportunities, and Dwight is going to present this. So we're going to have a short presentation, then we'll have a period to write questions, and then we'll answer questions. So, Dwight.
Thanks. So one of the things that we were tasked with is to identify potential opportunities for the students with this merger, and it's something that the group took very seriously. We tried to incorporate those into the Articles of Agreement, but we were kind of hamstrung in a way because we can't be very specific in the things that we say, but we can kind of have general broad strokes, because really it's the task of the next incoming board representing the towns that it's their job to make sure that those opportunities are realized for the students. So in that way, we addressed those opportunities, and I've read this before, but we'll be right off the bat, we put in Article 1 educational opportunities. So Article 1 reads, the Unified Board will act in the best interests of its students. In order to maximize the opportunities available to all students, the Unified Board will allow for educational opportunities provided at each school to be extended to all students in the district. So what they're saying there is the board, it's really the board's job to make sure that opportunities are spread throughout all the schools that are in the district. In addition, the board will seek opportunities for schools to share resources, educational programs, materials, and faculty expertise. The Unified Board will work towards enhancing educational opportunities that may become available for the benefit of all students in the district, including expanding curriculum, maximizing available technology, and introducing learning procedures or educational programs. The board will ensure that these opportunities are made available to all students in the district. So, is it specific? No. But does it kind of outline the job of the board? Yes, in a way. And I think if a parent or someone in the district could say, well, why is this school doing this and we're not? And the board has to take that seriously and try to make it available to all students. It's a little difficult without our show and tell. So there was, I'm going to go through some of these things. School choice. So the next thing, so some of the things that are available, of course, school choice is another one for elementary school students. The board has to allow for students to go between schools if they so choose, within reason. If there's availability or if there's a reason that someone may want to attend a different school, they should have that opportunity to do so. Within the district would be Marlboro, Wardsboro, and Dover. Let's see. Unique programs in 3 schools have the potential to be shared across the schools. Marlboro. So what are some of the drawbacks or consequences, they like to call them? Marlboro, of course, has a larger decision to make because if they join this district, they'll be losing their 7th and 8th grade middle school. So they'll be K through 6 like we will. Other things, teaching staff can be more easily shared. So there's an opportunity to move teachers around or substitute teachers from different schools if the board so chooses, and if the administration. Nope.
Keep going, Dwight.
All right, I'll keep going. Keep going.
We're not there yet.
So the teacher, yeah, thanks. So so teachers, one other thing, opportunity maybe to movement of some teachers between schools, if need be, sharing of let's say, for instance, art or music. Some of those items, teachers may be able to move between schools as well, and that could be a benefit or opportunity to share resources in that way. Of course, a substitute pool as well. Substitute teachers might be easier to keep the same substitute between 3 schools as well. Sub pool. How's it looking up there?
Dying.
Okay.
Dying to one.
All right, dying. So let's see, consequences of unification that are not aligned. I don't think that's me. No. So I guess that's. Anything else I missed, guys?
Hey, Rich, you should be able to narrow the focus on that projector.
Yeah, and what I think we're going to do is while we're doing questions, we're going to move it up. We're just checking the slide to make sure we cover everything.
Anyhow, that's all I have for now. But
Really large projection up here is what Dwight is talking about.
Yeah, right. It's a big picture.
It's a big picture.
I think if you pulled the shades down, it'd be fine.
You think you can see it?
It'd be fine.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Well done.
You still want the shade
All
down?
right. Ta-da! We talked about elementary school choice, sharing of programs, single teacher agreement. That means that teachers will be working for one district, not for the individual schools. So that allows for the movement of teachers between schools because they're really working for one district, not individual schools. Attracting quality teachers. The idea there is you have a larger pool to choose from. So that way, maintaining secondary choice by forming the district. We'll be keeping our K through 6. We'll still have choice in 7 through 12 for our middle and high school students. Shared teacher pool, shared special education costs. So the idea there is the cost for special education will be over the entire district rather than not having a burden on individual schools. This is going to be a tough one. Consequences of unified. Whoa, here we go. Thank you. Better. All right, so we talked about some of these as well. Consequences of a unified Unification not aligned with the goals of Act 46. Inequality, okay, that's a good one. Inequality due to transportation. So the idea is that, you know, that students can move between the schools, but that may be unequal there because some parents may have the ability to move their kids, transport them between schools, while other parents may not. So that could create some inequality. The junior high school in 7th, 8th, we talked about that. The choice. Potential shift in choice for Dover tuition? Is that what it says?
It's the tuition choice.
The choice. Right, so right now, each school district determines what the contribution is for middle and high school. And I believe Dover pays up to the Burton sending town. Wardsboro and Marlboro currently pay the statewide average. So, and each town determines what they'd like to do. This way, it'll be one vote, and the entire district will make one decision of how that is determined. So it'll be done throughout the whole district wide. Okay, and then I think that's it. All right,
Good job, Dwight.
you got through it, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to give you a few minutes. We're going to pass out some pink paper. Pink is education. We're going to pass you out some pens and ask you to just write any questions so that we can memorialize them in the future.
But you'll be allowed to ask your own questions.
And then we'll collect them, and then we'll open it up to anybody who wants to ask a question. And then if we still have time. I have a question. They don't like my questions. I'll let you pass some around. There you go.
No, but I know.
Who needs, anybody need a pen down there? Pass them over. He's got a pen, he's got a pen. Anybody wants to ask her question?
Well, you took their questions.
Are
and
you
you
reading
read
them?
We can either read them, or if somebody would like to ask them themselves. There's some excellent questions here.
What we can do is read the question. If it's your question, you can
Okay.
raise your hand
What
if you want to elaborate.
So what does this do for the Dover's IB process? So basically, again, as Dwight was saying, we provide a framework so the new board, if this goes through, your first question is, do you want to form this district? And then the second question is, who do you want to run that district? And those that are going to serve on the new board will decide what programming there is. We couldn't be specific. One of the things Dwight said is, we're doing a framework, because if we said, every school shall have an hour of Spanish every day, the problem is what if Spanish isn't the language most people want? What if we're finding, maybe Chinese or Arabic, or there's a different language? But if it's in the Articles of Agreement, it has to be followed. So we couldn't write in that the IB program will definitely be in there, but again, the new group will sit down, they will meet, they'll have open public meetings, you folks can come in and talk and ask questions and have input in the process, and then the new board will write up what will be happening. And will the amount of special activities increase, decrease, remain the same, language, art, music? Again, that will be the decision of the new board. They'll put together the program.
Could I amplify? Yeah, I was just going to say, though, that a lot of time was spent among the members of this committee identifying the ways in which the three schools are distinctly different from each other and celebrating those. So the articles say that each school is expected to maintain some of its individuality and diversity rather than all becoming one amalgam. So I think that's an important addendum to what was said.
That was my question. So meaning that Dover could maintain the IB program without the board saying they can and can't. It's kind of analogous to federal laws to state. Like the board comes up with certain rules and regulations of the whole district, but within each school, you can run your own programming, yes?
That's the way I understand it, yes.
One thing to add to that too, the articles do allow for parent groups to be established within each of the schools, and the whole idea of them would be sort of it's not like the school club, it would be more like an advocacy group to advocate the board for things they might want to see in their particular building. So you could continue to lobby for that, or you could come up with new things. Yeah, we need a, whatever, do baskets in the gym or whatever. Yeah.
Well, isn't it supposed to be about equal educational opportunity?
Substantially equal, it doesn't have to be exactly the same in every building.
So a pre-K 3-year-old program doesn't have to be expanded to all schools?
And that was one of the things that the committee, especially Dwight, was really, and Marlboro was concerned about, because each school has a very good program, and each school is doing really well by doing it in a different way. So we're hoping we can blend all three programs and maybe put something together that's even more exceptional than what we all have individually.
At a
But
lower cost to us?
Never.
supposedly.
So,
Did you, well,
can I just follow up on that? So there's going to be, there'll be one board. So that board will have our intent, but the board will run all three schools. So the board will make decisions about all three schools. This individual schools will not, it's, I think, our intent that what's excellent about each of the schools, we would like to remain, and kids to have a choice between those schools. But there won't be three different decision-making places.
I understand the one board element. My concern is that in Dover, we put so much time and money into the IB program that if that's not clear to, say, me as the voter, that program is going to stay, that can be a deal breaker for me. And that's really hard.
did somebody want to respond to that from the board?
Maybe I can just throw out one point. I mean, as it currently stands, the local school board could also decide to get rid of it if it's not meeting the educational needs of the students. That's kind of where now the combined board could also make that same decision. But I think the framework is being put in place so that we can maintain the individual, what do you want to call it, the distinctiveness of the individual schools, their strengths and things like that. But there's no guarantee. We can't lock the new board into some sort of framework and say, you will maintain IB for the next 10 years. It is our wish that that would happen, but we can't lock them into it.
Did you want to
respond?
Yeah.
I just want, the way it stands right now, all of the boards in each of the three towns work in partnership with the school administration. So the principals work in partnership with the boards to build programming, to build budgets, to create, the best possible budget scenario to meet the needs of every student at a cost, so we work in partnership with them. And that same process would be very true if this new board were to exist. So it would be one board working with the principals from each of the three schools, and each of those principals would be advocating for their individual schools and its programming. And as far as I don't know, I live in Marlboro, but I know that the IB program is very, very important in Dover. But I also know that there's been a lot of time and energy and resources put into it, and I don't foresee it being scrapped. I mean, it seems pretty silly. And we actually do print something that's fairly similar in Marlboro. It doesn't have a name, but we do a lot of the same things that the IB does. We just haven't gone through the IB process. So
one of the difficult things this group had to face was we had a very narrow charge. We weren't charged with designing a new school or a new school district. We were really charged, we weren't even charged whether to decide to go through with this. Well, I should say that. We were charged to basically come up with articles of agreement to present to voters. The Windham Central Supervisory Union and the super board that governs that decided that all the schools in the district would go through with the Act 46 process. Over the summer, that's when we were formed for the three towns, Dover, Marlboro, and Wardsboro, to come up with a framework that would work, or that could conceivably work and meet state approval for a merged district under Act 46. That's the point we're at right now. So, moving forward, this is going to go to the voters next week. It'll either be voted up or down, and then we'll move forward from there, depending on what happens with the vote. But we can't answer all the questions because that wasn't our charge. We had to leave things for a new school board to develop if the articles were approved and if the merger would take place. And there's still 2 years to do that. So there'll still be plenty of time to work through all of these questions as things move forward, if things pass next week. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. It was a really difficult process to go through because we couldn't just say, oh, we need this and we need that and we need that, because we felt as a group we didn't want to lock a future board into certain things other than some of the big things, which we'll talk about as we go through some of the slides in the process. So just keep that in mind, that we're not going to have all the answers. And one of the answers you're going to hear a fair amount of tonight is, well, that's going to be for the future board to decide. So we're going to kick the can down the road a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to read some of these out. And so the next question was, what if either Dover or Wardsboro votes no?
And the merger doesn't go through.
Fails.
Voluntarily go through.
You want to take it further than that? I mean,
If you want to go further than that, so then
the last
Dover
one.
has to decide what we want to do as Dover voters. Wardsboro have to decide what they want to do, and Marlboro, if they vote yes or no, they'll have to decide after that. What we have done is Windham Central Supervisory Union, our supervisory district, will be reorganizing the Monday after town meeting, and we're going to look at the votes and see what happened and make a plan. Maybe we can do something district-wide for a alternative structure, or maybe I don't know what, but we're going to try to get all the people together and try and make a decision on what our next moves could be.
Can the state come in and dictate what
The
happens?
state will, if you don't get approved for if you don't do a voluntary merger, if you don't get approved for an alternative structure, the state will redistrict you.
Yes.
As it stands
Define
now.
alternative structure?
As it stands now.
Pardon?
Define alternative structure.
Something that doesn't meet the requirements of the state. If you go to Act 46, you'll see they have the preferred structure, which is supervisory districts, and then they have all these little structures below. We're asking for what's called a side-by-side, which means that there's one district that's a K through 12, which would be the Leland and Gray towns. There's 5 towns with the Leland and Gray Union High School. And then the other side would be the elementary K through 6s with secondary choice. And Marlboro, although they're K through 8, they chose to do the study with us. But one thing the state can't do is the state can't change your structure. So they couldn't say to Marlboro, hey, look, you didn't vote for it voluntarily, but we're going to put you with Dover and Wardsboro, because they would change their structure. And they can't say to Wardsboro or us, we're putting you with Leland and Gray towns, because that changes our structure.
But to partially answer your question, define alternative structure, that is currently being defined by the legislature, and Laura can speak to this more, but draft rules just came out yesterday, another redraft of the rules defining alternative structure. They're not even in their full implemented form yet, so it's difficult for anyone here to know what alternative structure is going to look like when it gets done being defined. Which is one of the reasons why Marlboro has gone into this as being an advisable, so that if Marlboro votes no, it doesn't affect Dover Wardsboro, but it gives us time to continue to investigate the alternative structure. That could substantially change. There are some rules, there's some legislation being looked at right by the Senate as we speak, which would change the way districts could form alternative structures. But it's like Randy said, a lot of these questions, the answers are going to be, we just don't know at this point.
Yeah. And the other thing about the alternative structure is the state still wants to create larger school districts. In their line of thinking, they think that will help level out property tax rates. It will increase opportunities for kids because it will offer more programs in a larger district. And there's a number of other reasons. So even in the draft rules for alternative structures, they're still going to try to push schools into preferred groups. If they can't push them into preferred groups, then they'll look at alternative structures. But it's not going to be business as usual. I just don't see that the way it's going to be. So it's really a question of how do we control our own destiny to the best possible degree. And I hate to say that, I hate to be fatalist about it, but I think that's where it's headed.
But if we had 900 students, we could be our own. We would qualify for a preferred structure. So.
Just a point of clarification, the draft rules right now from the state board of Education,
From the state board.
not the legislature.
Not from the legislature.
That's,
It's from the agency, not, they're from the agency,
They're
not
in front
the
of it,
board.
yeah.
yes, right.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll get it clear, Dan.
Right,
We'll
but
get it
there's
clear.
also-
They're not from the
So
legislature.
we're not hanging this on the
Um,
line.
But there are Senate bills also being introduced
There are Senate
as we
bills,
speak,
yes.
which would change alternative schools.
Absolutely, and there are House bills that have been proposed that are not moving, that would do the same.
Okay. The 7th through 12th grade choice will not go away, question mark.
No, they cannot
Not
change
go
our
away.
That
structure.
can't be changed.
Won't go away.
So,
Not without a court case.
Yeah.
So these are-
It could go away from Marlboro if they vote to join us.
Right.
So they have the bigger risk. They have the bigger decision to make. in
Marlboro
terms of-
currently has 9 through 12 choice. We would add choice for 7 and 8 to each other.
Yes, I said that
It's
wrong.
just changing our.
They were
choice.
losing 7th and 8th grade.
so Dover, Marlboro, and Wardsboro will all be on one teacher contract. When would that be negotiated?
So this would, if we vote for this on town meeting day, it doesn't take effect for 2 more school years. So we don't even know if there would be a contract, because all the staff would have to decide whether or not they want to unionize. There's a whole procedure for voting on that, and then there would be a period of time before we actually started operating it. And that's why we actually put it out there further. The state wanted us to do it in a year, and we said 2 years because there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot of work to do.
Moving teachers sounds like losing teachers. What is your take on this?
Does the person who asked that mind explaining that a little bit or clarifying?
You know, a lot of teachers like where they're teaching, and to be told maybe in the spring that they might be moving to a different location because that was needed at another school. It just sounds like you could lose some of your long-term, well-established teachers in schools.
What it's actually meant to do is preserve long-term teachers. So let's just say in Dover, we lost 100 or 50 students, and now all of a sudden we don't need as much staff, but they all moved over towards the Wardsboro side, and that building all of a sudden has 50 new students. So instead of laying somebody off, the person could then be said, you know, here, we've got this need now in Wardsboro. It's more of a sharing. It's don't think of it as a moving, because remember, it's one district with operating 3 buildings. So it may be temporarily we need you over there, and the idea was to help keep people and give a little bit more security to jobs. And also, you know, right now we do pretty well with Windham Central sharing, but there's sometimes you don't need a full-time person, but maybe in the Marlboro building they need a half-time phys ed teacher, and in Dover they need a quarter time, and in Wardsboro they need a quarter time. So instead of hiring 3 part-time people, we could hire 1 full-time person. They would have a full-time job with benefits and be able to rotate between the buildings.
Follow-up. So you don't foresee, being that you're running for this board, Richard, that moving teachers would be based on, oh, well, we need somebody who's an expert at teaching math in this particular school, and so we're going to take this teacher that's been really qualified in teaching math at one school and say, we're going to send you over here for at least a year or 2. You don't see that kind of, you don't see that kind of reassignment?
What I see, if I was benevolent dictator of the school system, I would see that teacher's going to work on an in-service day with the other teachers to show what they've done to make it so strong. Because remember, moving people around too much, the more you move people, the more it creates chaos. So my thought, though, is it's easier now because we'll do in-service instead of having an in-service in each building. There'll be some type of in-service that involves everybody, and those with strengths can help those that need help.
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Okay. Okay, and then,
And I was just gonna point to the time too, just so.
okay. Yeah, we've been on this.
Yeah, give it a couple more minutes. This
Okay.
last time we ran out.
So this is kind of 2-part. What is the potential for teacher movement? What's to say the state won't later tell districts that have aligned that they now have no high school choice?
And Laura answered that.
Yeah, I think that's only going to be a court case at this point. Because, well, there's not the wherewithal to get that passed as legislation by the legislature right now with the composition. I have a hard time seeing that anytime soon. The state board can put out rules which they've been doing, different rules, looking at independent schools, that some people feel limits school choice. That conversation is ongoing. I don't think we will ever be getting rid of school choice without, though, a court case. I do think that that could come.
It was once mentioned that the voters could petition for a certain tuition. What would that require? Number of signatures, et cetera? Is that what that says?
So the law says, the state law says, you pay the statewide average tuition or that voted on by the electorate at the annual meeting every year. So in Dover, we've always said if you get a petition, enough signatures on the petition once, we'll just keep putting it on there. And that would probably, it would be up to the new board to decide, but a petition requires a certain amount of signatures each, and you can tell you it's
5%.
5%
Of the voters,
So Dover's the biggest voting block, so how many are needed in Dover?
50.
So you would need, less than 150 signatures between the three towns. But the board can also just put it on at a request too. You don't have to petition. And I would think, again, this board isn't going to operate in secret. It doesn't go on high. They'll have open meetings and parents can come and say at an open meeting, this is something we really want. It should be able to happen.
So wouldn't the possibility of a district vote to pay the Burton tuition mean a potential reduction in educational opportunities for Dover students, i.e. parents who can't afford the difference? I think that meant, wouldn't the possibility of a district vote to not pay the Burton tuition mean a potential reduction in opportunities for the Dover students, for the parents, the children of parents who could not afford the difference between the amount paid and the Burton tuition?
This is something Wardsboro is considering right now. So right now, Wardsboro pays the statewide average, but that's going to be changing for this year because the Leland and Gray rate is $16,000 and the Burton is $16,700. So that's something that we're going to be deciding in Wardsboro to be sending kind as well. So that's something we're considering doing. So, but I guess to answer the question, it would be a vote, wide for all three districts. That's what the question is.
Okay. And what is the cost difference between Burton and the current state average? So it was 16 to 16.7?
That's pretty high. 16.7 is BBA, and I think it's 14.5 or 15, somewhere in that neighborhood. But to pay for, that's the sending town rate for Burton. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 18,000 if you're not a sending town for a family to send a student, which is one of the reasons nearly every single town that's within 50-mile radius of BBA is a sending town. I think Wardsboro is the only one who's not, and we're considering it now, including Dover.
So about $3,000.
No.
No, I think it's 15.4, I just looked it up.
Yeah.
I think it's
Difference?
What do we pay?
14,900, I think was.
14.9.
Yeah, versus 18. Well, I guess 18.
So that's 16.7.
But that number is really
That's a fair
irrelevant
sending.
because it's what you pay to a public high school is the real tuition number. So
That's
I don't know what Twin Valley is this year. Brattleboro's in the 18 range, isn't it, Wes? Rich?
No.
No, I think it's actually
Brattleboro's
14.7. That's the one we were.
Leland and Gray and Twin Valley are usually
Are the higher.
Yeah.
So that's really
The
baseline.
difference right now is about $1,800 for those of you from Dover. I mean, we'll have a spreadsheet for you tomorrow night, and we'll have it at town meeting, but I think it's somewhere around a little under $2,000.
And then board members are ratioed to what representative numbers? So what's the ratio of?
So there's going to be 9 board members if all 3 towns approve it, and there'll be 3 from each town. What we did was we wanted to have it be kind of even, so we said you'll have 3 board members for up to a certain population, and if you go over that, it comes down. If you lose a lot of population, you may lose, and another school may be a little bit bigger. Right now, there's 4 members from Dover on this committee and 3 from the other towns, but we used a different formula to come up with the representation.
Are there criteria for elementary school choice?
And that's one of the first things that the new board will have to do is come up with criteria. And we specifically put before the school opens, before the new district opens, there has to be criteria.
I've heard from parents in Dover who would have liked K-6 choice. What are likely conditions? So say that was basically just answered. That hasn't been determined yet, for the board of trustees.
No, wait,
It's K through
she's
six.
talking about non-operating, I think, Rich. K to
Non-operating.
6
K through
choice.
6.
So becoming a non-operating.
Wow. I've heard from parents who would have like K-6 choice, what are like
What are the conditions on this choice
Your
within a
choice-
unified
So
district?
the
Oh,
state,
In a unified
statewide,
district.
the state law allows a certain percentage of students to have choice, and you can go to another school. You have to petition the boards, and there's a whole process. If a parent really has interest in it, we can give you the information. With this, remember, this is one district, so this district is gonna operate 3 buildings. It's gonna operate a building in Wardsboro, one in Dover, and one in Marlboro, or it'll operate 2 buildings, depending on the vote, one in Dover and one in Wardsboro. At this time, you said that you will go to the building that's in the town that you reside in. If you'd like to go to the other building, we said that the new board has to set criteria, because you don't want everybody from Dover saying, I want to go to Wardsboro because the Wardsboro building isn't big enough. And if Wardsboro has too many students, they don't want to go to the Dover building, it's not going to work. So that's why we have to set criteria. And again, we weren't specific, but things that were bouncing around is, where the siblings, where the parents work, where they actually live in the town. Because there's some people that live in Wardsboro that are closer to the Dover school than parents who live in Dover, and vice versa. So there will be criteria set, and again, it's not going to be done in some hidden location where all of a sudden the rules will be handed to you. It'll be done in open meetings where there will be input accepted from everybody, and the board will make a decision and vote on it. And again, it will be a policy, and policies get reviewed every so often, or when asked to be reviewed, they can be reviewed and changed.
Can I ask a question? So the board is going to make decisions. Will this new board, if we vote yes, have an annual meeting where things like the Burr and Burton tuition are decided by voters?
Yeah, it has to be decided by voters. It's the electorate that
And
decides.
so there'll be an annual meeting combined all 3 towns?
The original, the
in some
first
central
meeting, and this gets into governance more, but the first meeting has to be Australian ballot. So all these items will be decided by Australian ballot. The electorate can vote to, in the future, have a town meeting style meeting, but it'll be one meeting wherever it decides to be. And all 3 towns, or all 3 of the groups, or 2, if there's only 2, will have to come together. And so instead of being a town meeting at Dover, it would be a meeting of that district. And Leland and Gray used to do it. They had such poor turnout. Even Brattleboro does it, and they have very low turnout, so all their stuff is done by Australian ballot. We felt strongly, we had a lot of discussion about that, but the law requires us, the first vote has to be Australian ballot.
The vote at the first annual meeting of the new board?
Right.
Okay, and then you can go from the floor, and that's the meeting where it would be decided whether you pay an additional amount for tuition. Thank you.
Instead of being an article and discuss, it'll be on the ballot.
Yep.
Do you want to pay this amount per?
And another question could be, in the future, will we vote from the floor?
Right, will we
Okay.
have a meeting, public meeting versus a district meeting?
Thank you.
So there's 3 kind of special education questions. How do the current sped costs compare from school to school now? How many special ed students are in the individual towns? And what's the potential increase for special education costs to the district? Is the rate of reimbursement for costs going to be the same? So the first 2 are kind of related, really, because cost and number of students. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about how many students
We're not sure how many students there are in that being individual schools. And really, we try not to do anything to identify the students, so we can actually get you some numbers from central office, but I don't believe anybody here has that number.
I wanted to ask how many kids there were at Dover special ed, and I was told I couldn't be told that information.
And-
Number of people.
And a couple of years ago, the legislature actually changed the law, and the special ed now goes through the supervisory union. So the supervisory union actually does all the special education, and we pay them based on our number of pupils. So what we would just be doing is all the numbers would go together, and that they would present a bill to the district.
So do we know the differential between the 3 schools?
No, I don't. We would,
The one big difference though would be instead of each school being individually billed, like, so Marlboro has 79 students. I know that off the top of my head because it's where I work. But so right now Marlboro gets billed for 79 students. If all three schools are combined, then it would be one bill for 416 students, I think is our total number. So the costs would level out a little bit because there's a larger pool to spread it out over all of the kids. The goal with that, which was the goal with the previous act, not Act 46, the one that changed how special ed is funded, is so that way school budgets that usually do this with special ed funding, because it depends on who moves into town, who moves out of town, and what is identified, and so on and so forth, where it would be a little bit less of a roller coaster, because it'd be a larger pool to spread those costs out, and it's anonymity. You know, if you have a student that moves into Wardsboro that's a super high need student and you see a sudden spike in their school budget, you're gonna be like, oh, I know who that is, and that's not really fair. So it spreads it out and gives families a little bit more.
So is the rate of reimbursement going to be the same?
yeah,
The rate of-
it'll be the combined rate instead of the individual schools. You know, it doesn't change the rate. The reimbursements go through the central office now. So basically, we don't actually get reimbursements anymore. What happens is we get billed less.
So there were a couple other questions, but they're more into another area, so we're going to hold them until we get to that area. So if you didn't hear your question, you're not being ignored. You're just moving it into another category. So now, which is the next presentation area?
Yeah, right, I'm blind you then, right?
Oh, this financial.
Financial implications.
We missed
The intro?
yeah, we missed the charge or mission statement.
So, this is what I call this carrot and stick part of the presentation. Because the state, the legislature, developed, and along with the Agency of Education, developed a series of incentives for towns that go through this voluntary merger process. The particular ones we're using qualify under the side-by-side, and that's Act 153. It's not really Act 146, but anyway. Bottom line is, the carrot part of it is, should a new district form, if you look at the top line there, residential tax reduction would occur over 4 years. And this is an artificial deflation of your tax rate after all the budgeting is done, after all the costs of the new school district are calculated and it's approved. Whatever that tax rate is, in the first year, it's going to be dropped by 8 cents. And we do have some ballpark numbers here. Anyway, I'll get to that. It's also in our website. But and then in the second year, we'll go to 6 cents. The third year, 4 cents. The fourth year, 2 cents. And then in the fifth year, it would level out at what the real rate is, not your reduced rate. That's one of the carrots. One of the other carrots, and this is also one of the sticks, is that if the merger takes place, all 3 towns, or all 2 towns, depending on how many end up actually approving this, would get to keep their small school grants. Dover currently gets 61,000, Marlboro 116, Wardsboro 83. So if you vote this down, that money goes away. Some people will dispute that, but at this point, the understanding is that money will go away. The other thing, which doesn't really affect Dover, but does affect particularly Wardsboro quite a bit, is the hold harmless clause, which you might have read in the newspapers or heard school administrators talk about what's called phantom students. And that's basically a soft landing phase to allow schools to compensate for declining enrollments, which most schools in the state, with the exception of Dover and a few others, are going through. Wardsboro currently has 6.88 phantom students. How you guys get that 0.88, I don't know. But anyway, so they continue to receive money from the state for those theoretical kids, even though there aren't really people in the building for those numbers. So that would continue under the merged district. Those would go away if this merger does not go through. And then the other things would be the schools would be able to negotiate group contracts. A lot of that's already being done through Windham Central. Anyway, and standardize accounting methods for the 3 schools. So there would be 1 audit for the larger district versus 3 audits now for 3 individual school districts. So there was a little bit of cost savings for the district there. Consequences of not aligning are consequences I need to say this the right way. This is sort of a con of what the district could be. There could be difficulty understanding a larger unified budget because you're looking at bigger numbers, it's more obscure. Obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about the town meeting and how that would change. And that's one of the real concerns, and obviously Andy brought that up. How do citizens stay engaged? Right now, it's real easy. You go to your town meeting, you have a school district portion of it, you talk about your budget, you show your hands, up or down, boom, you're done. This would have to be different, particularly in the first year. As Rich said, the law does require Australian ballot on the first year of the new district. After that, you could go back to a town meeting style format, but it wouldn't be a town meeting like you have in each of the individual towns. Again, it would have to be a district-wide meeting at some neutral location somewhere. One year it might be in Marlboro, one year it might be here, one year it might be in Wardsboro. Probably that would be the scenario. So that would change a little bit. And then obviously a unified board meeting could hinder parent participation because the board might meet in Wardsboro the night you want to go to talk about an issue. So you might not want to go to Wardsboro that night. There was a question asked at one of our meetings, could people Skype into that? Technically, yes, they could. How easy that would be to set up, we don't really know. But it shouldn't be that complicated. So you could sit in your living room and Skype in on your phone and talk to the school board, in theory. So those are some of the consequences. And the reason that says of not aligned with Act 46, so Act 46 has certain things we had to align with. And we had to show to the state, these are the things that our plan aligns with in terms of the goals of Act 46. These are the things that don't align with the goals of Act 46. I know it's confusing. We had a hard time understanding it too. But you work with this stuff long enough, it makes sense. That's kind of one of the scary things about all this. Anyway, where are we? What's next, Selena?
Questions?
Questions. So you want to put the tax slide back up so people can see that? And so come up with some questions on that. The tax part of it is pretty straightforward. Now I know one of the big questions out there is going to be, what kind of savings would I see with a unified district? We don't know, because we don't know what the budgets will be. What we did do, I got it right here. What we did do, and we don't have a slide for this unfortunately, but we did go through the exercise of taking the current budgets of the 3 school districts, putting them into a grinder, making sausage with them, and coming out with what the cost would be. So under a unified system as it currently stands right now in this school year, the number of equalized students would be, as Selena said, 417 students. The total overall budget would be $6.5 million. Dover's right now is 3. So, we're sucking up a lot of that right now. There would be some immediate savings in terms of the audits that I talked about, in terms of support expenses. That would drive it down about $40,000. The tax rate under the unified district, the homestead rate, just without any of the state incentives that you see up there in the first year, the unified tax rate would be $1.61 for the 3 towns. Now, Dover right now is paying $1.57. So you factor in the 8-cent reduction, and that would go down to $1.53 on the unified rate. So you would see a 4-cent savings, again, artificially reduced because of the merger incentives for the first year. Where that went beyond that, we don't know. And we don't even know that that would happen in the first year because, again, you're talking about speculative numbers. These are numbers based on the current year. As we all know, talking about schools, costs don't stay the same, and they don't generally go down. That's just, fortunately, the way it is. Marlboro would see the biggest savings under this scenario. They would save, under our sample number, 20 cents on their tax rate, which would be including the 8-cent savings. Wardsboro would save 6 cents. Now, conversely, if you didn't do this and you lose your small school grants, again, based on current numbers, Dover's tax rate would go up 4 cents, I think we calculated. So there's a potential 8-cent swing based on current numbers to do this or not do it. So you can decide whether that's of value to you or not. A penny on the tax rate on the school side is... Okay, so anyway, those are some of the tax implications of it. So if you got questions, write them out, hold up your hands, I'll come around and fix them up.
Okay, just Blake. Sorry.
Oh, Blake, questions? I know you got some. Both? Okay, anybody else? Madam Moderator. Vicky, you want to just fire off?
Okay, all right.
I want to be well informed.
Ken Balin, he's had enough.
So, well, we'll start with the two that came from the last. So one of the questions we had was how much will consolidation save overall, estimated savings to the state? Where do those savings come from specifically?
Yeah, I think Randy said the savings identified is one audit instead of three, and I think each audit is about $18,000.
The part of this was estimated savings to the state. Did you mean the overall statewide, what they're expecting?
Yeah, basically what is the net savings that we're getting, that the state is getting for this consolidation, if this goes through?
You mean like throughout the entire state, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, the impetus of this is for the state, you know, I mean.
No, that's a fallacy, and one of the things I asked for was really difficult. There's not one, you can't go somewhere and find a 4-sentence paragraph that says this is what Act 46 was all about. It's very convoluted. One of the things you hear a lot of people say, it was never about saving money, it's about offering more opportunity and for students, because you have a bigger governance structure, so you have more, but there also may be some cost savings. There was a comment in the Digger, I don't always, again, in the press, you can't always believe everything you read, how it comes out, and no insult to our local press here, but
it's all fake news. Get used to it.
Marlboro, Newfane and Brookline combined, went into a joint unified district like Twin Valley did, Wilmington and Whitingham, and there was some cost savings, but that was for closing buildings. And one of the things is we fought very hard for, and the state didn't want us to, say that you can't close a building unless the electorate in that town approves it. So we said there's not a lot of cost savings, and the comeback was, well, it wasn't meant to save costs, it was meant to provide more opportunities. But there are some cost savings that will come, like they said, just because of having 2 less audits if we were to do this. There are some savings in the tax rate. It's artificial for 4 years, and then there's some savings because we don't lose certain grants. I'm going to let Laura then explain any other.
I mean, I think first of all, I think any savings that may accrue, it's May. When Act 46 was voted on, people in the State House were pretty clear that it would not be, the primary focus was not to save money. I don't know if we don't want to take up a ton of time on this, but the current finance mechanism creates more opportunities for kids in larger schools. And so what we have a constitution that says we have to have substantially equitable opportunities. So we've got a very big range of opportunities that are available for kids. And so by really strong-arming, encouraging people to come together, you hopefully are starting to get rid of some of those disparities and opportunities. And if you don't get rid of those disparities and opportunities, the thing that is coming is, again, a court case. And so I think there's definitely was knowledge that we have these huge disparities and it's not fair. I mean, we're all paying into a system that's supposed to be providing all Vermont students equitable opportunities.
Right.
I don't know that this is going to fix that.
I didn't mean to go off as if my primary concern is the savings. And we've heard from Randy here that if you look at it not from the state level but from the town level, 8 cents on the tax, 4 plus or 4 minus, my taxes, it's like less than $200 a year. So that's not the major thing, and I totally understand.
Well, for
opportunities is important.
Yeah, I would actually, may I please just finish? I think savings is very important for a lot of people to be able to get to savings, but we have a statewide system that makes it very challenging for individual towns to achieve those savings on their own.
So you want to know about the big picture. So in December of every year, the state tax department has to produce a letter to the legislature that talks about, among other things, tax rates and projections. So I happen to have that letter. The letter this year is projected, the year-over-year change in fiscal year 15 for all education spending in the state of Vermont was 4.25%. In fiscal year 16, which is the year that ended last June, it was 2.56. The preliminary projection in fiscal year 17, which is the first year under Act 46, the growth, and this is really what the state is hoping to do, is not to save money, but to slow the rate of growth. They won't really admit that, but that's really what they're coming down to. The projected rate for fiscal year 17 is 1.53%. That's substantially lower. There's a reason for that, but I'll get back to that. In fiscal year 18, it's projected to go back up to 2.5% of growth in overall school spending. So why did it slow down to 1.5% in this current year? Laura, you want to say why? You know why. Because this year there was a 2% cap on spending in the original version of Act 46. So school districts had to stay within that or face some pretty stiff penalties. Now that cap was repealed in the legislature a year ago. So school spending is going to creep back up. So if you think your property tax rates are going to go down because of what happens with this group, the only thing that's really going to make it go down is that artificial 8 cents. It's not going to be the overall statewide average. Huh?
And the grants.
And the grants, yes.
Yeah, and I think that the amount of savings is probably pretty negligible. You know, as I've listened to this and I'm thinking more and more about the IB thing, and where in the consolidated district the savings would come from, like the pooling of staff and faculty resources, makes me a little bit worried about IB, because that's a lot of specialized training with faculty. It's going to impede the district from mixing and matching, moving faculty around too much. So, you know, it's just, when I think about, like, well, what's the actual saving, money savings part of it, doesn't really strengthen it.
It's not really good. Somewhat.
Yeah, I don't know that we've made a strong case for sustained savings over time. I mean, you know, some more manageable opportunity costs maybe, but, you know, that we do have the incentives the next 4 years.
And remember that the 8 cents is the first year that it goes down to 6, and then 4, and then 2, and then disappears.
Next question I have here is the tax reduction offered by the state, the 8, 6, 4, and 2. Won't the statewide school property tax just increase across the board to cover these reductions, meaning it's not really that big a savings?
I think that's true. And sort of, if you take your question back to your original one, the state isn't saving those 8, 6, 4, 2. This district would if it merges, but that money comes out of the ed fund.
And the ed fund is all paid by us.
So, it's all a shell game, really, when you get down to it, in terms of tax stuff. And then we're not even talking about the CLAs.
Oh, that's
That's coming up.
100%.
Okay. Is it true that without the side-by-side vote, the carrots incentives wouldn't not happen or would not happen?
If Dover and Wardsboro vote yes and Windham and Great Towns vote no, then we can't be that structured. But then I think we would go and argue and yell and scream and probably invade Montpelier and say, hey, look, we did our part. It's not our fault. You need to take care of us. And then we got to beat up our legislator a little bit.
I can take it.
Huh? She'll make it happen.
So when does this get approved? If we pass it, when does it get approved by the state?
It's already been approved. State board approved it, and that's what the requirement is. So if you vote on this on next Tuesday, Wednesday, that new board can meet and start, you know, if Dover, Wardsboro, and Marlboro all approved it, we would get our representatives together and we would organize that board and we would start work right away because, you know, you think 2 years is a long time and, you know, we have been studying this for 2 years and it seems like it's gone like that. There's a lot more we wish we could have done.
As part of this CLA in the district has been brought up by the state, I'm unsure what would mean
A
for
common
us.
CLA in the district.
Oh, as part of this common CLA in the district has been brought up by the state, I'm unsure what that would mean for us in Dover. Any comments?
So there's been a study done looking at allowing towns to do this, to just kind of smooth out the tax rates. And I don't believe we have that introduced. But
Right now,
the
it
language,
would not be a common CLA.
It was also
If
optional.
it goes through as it is now, the
'Cause you could
CLAs of the 3 individual towns would stay where they are.
yes. But there has been work done to look at, if, what would it look like if we allowed, these towns to kind of merge their school district grand lists together for the purposes of the CLA. And it's really being phrased as a, if we allowed you to do that, if that would smooth things out for you, as opposed to required. But
One of the things that, Dover has always been very good about is if you look through the years of Act 68, it helped us a lot in Act 68, is our listers have always nailed that grand list. I mean, one time we were at 105%. Very rarely have we been below that, and that's helped us because that artificially lowers the tax rate, I guess. But one of the things that'll happen is, if the budget will be decided and each town would get their share of what it's going to be on their tax rate, and then you would adjust in each individual town by the CLA. So the numbers Randy was using don't include the CLA. Those are just basic numbers, like a down and dirty calculation. So if we were at 105%, those numbers Randy gave you, we'd actually be a little bit lower. And I think this year, Vicki, what are we at, 104? So, and other towns, you know what you're at?
I think we're 100% actually, or within 1%.
Do you know what Wardsboro is? I mean, I think one of the issues in Windham is their CLA is way down, and that's what's, helping them increase. Pardon? Yeah, that makes tax rate higher. So if you were at 100%, those numbers would be good, but you have to adjust them by the CLA.
Okay. Okay.
Or we can hit them.
Okay. So where will the board meet, and can it be at a central location instead of moving around?
And that would be the decision of that board with input from all the people, all the voters, parents.
What will happen with the board if there is a side-by-side with Leland and Gray? I'm not, who asked that question?
There will only be a board if it's a side-by-side with Leland and Gray.
They'll have a board and this requirement.
So Dover
does not have a board anymore. There'll be the River Valley School District will have a board. Leland and Gray will have a board. Leland and Gray's numbers, does anybody remember? It's pretty good size. 12? 11? Okay, so, and then depending on what happens with Marlboro, Stratton is looking to try to go into the Bennington district, Bennington-Rutland. And if Marlboro was to come with us, then we'd have a 9-member board. That would be it.
So next area. Blindness.
You're gonna go get blinded.
Yeah.
Yes, now.
This is just going over the time frame a little bit. We kind of hit on the board membership already and how it's representative, so the equal representation from all 3 towns. And then at town meeting next Tuesday, when you're voting yes or no for the merger, even if you decide to vote no, you should still vote for who you would like to represent your interests on a merged board, because if the vote does go through, it'd be a good thing to have some say in who is going to be your representative. So that's an important thing to think about. So what's the time frame? So going forward, basically we can start meeting, like Rich said, on March 8th. Most likely it'll be, oh, that's right on the window. That's a really bad time to see that, isn't it? A little better, I guess. We as a supervisory union are going to meet actually the Tuesday after town meeting, all at Leland and Gray, Monday, sorry, all at Leland and Gray. So board reorganization will probably happen then, not on actually March 8th, but pretty darn close. And then we will spend the next 2 years figuring out all these pieces that we all have questions about, whether, all transportation things and teacher contracts and, programs and, all of these, there's all kinds of policies and procedures that the state says that we have to adopt. and put forward for our schools anyway. And this, again, would happen in partnership with the administration of the 3 schools. The principals would be our cohorts in this mission. And then it would start operation for fiscal year 2020. So July 1st, 2019, this is when the new River Valley's school district would start operation. So for the next 2 years beyond that, you know, for 2017, 2018, those current boards as they exist now will continue to operate the 3 individual schools. This is kind of just breaking down what happens if somebody votes no, somebody votes yes. So as Dan alluded to earlier, Marlboro is considered advisable status to this endeavor, because Marlboro has a larger question about our junior high and whether or not we actually want to change our operating structure, because we don't have any natural gas partners within our supervisory union. We chose we didn't want to tie anyone's hands. So if Marlboro votes no and Dover and Wardsboro vote yes, Dover and Wardsboro can petition the Agency of Education to say, hey, we did our work, we really think this is the best bet, help us out. And Marlboro also could choose to, one of the things that some folks in town are talking about is taking an extra year to figure out the alternative structure, what is going to shake out with that, and then we actually have a year, next year town meeting, 2018, we could vote to rejoin the merger, and Dover and Wardsboro would have to let us back in because we were a part of the original deal. There is some question as to whether or not that's, you know, the best bet, because we will be a year behind in, you know, participating in the process with everyone, but it's still something that could happen. So if Dover votes no, Wardsboro and Marlboro vote yes, the merger fails. Dover residents can petition for a revote with 5% of the population. Same goes for Wardsboro. If Wardsboro votes no and Dover and Marlboro vote yes, the merger also fails. But again, if folks, you know, depending on how the vote shakes out, and folks think it's worth reconsidering, a revote can be held. And if not, then schools will have to figure out, you know, what's the next steps, which will be a conversation at the WCSU meeting the following Monday. And then if each town votes no, petitions can be submitted to the Agency of Education for alternative structures, or other avenues can be figured out, or they can just wait to be reassigned. And then there's the whole other side of the Leland and Gray question. If Leland and Gray votes no, and our 3 towns vote yes, again, I think we can petition the agency to say, hey, we did all of our work, we have all this documentation. It's another reason why we're having you all write down your questions tonight, because we're documenting, it's all data. The state loves data. So that's what we're giving them. So that way we can say, this is what we've done. And again, districts and their local boards will continue to operate until July 1, 2019. And because we were having technical difficulties here at the very beginning, I just want to, here, I'm going to hide this so that way I don't make you seasick, but I'm going to jump back up to the very top of our slide. Because one of the things that I think is just good to see is I'm making myself seasick. One of the things that we worked really hard at the very beginning, well, actually it was kind of halfway through the process. You know, there were so many pieces here that we were trying to figure out, and there were so many questions, and it was really easy to get, you know, bogged down into a rabbit hole about programmatic questions and transportation questions and whatnot. So we really felt like we needed to guide ourselves through this process. So we actually spent some time creating a vision statement, not only for ourselves, but also for the board that would then, you know, move on from here. Oh, that's not the right one. Where is it? Sorry. See, I was making myself seasick. So with respect for each town's local identity, we envision a unified school district that will represent how the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. By sharing resources and talents, we believe this alliance can provide students and teachers access to increased educational opportunities and improved services. So this was kind of how we wanted to lay out things for the new board, and it helped us, you know, kind of stay on track throughout this process as well. So I just wanted to share that all with you, since I didn't get to do that at the beginning.
And one of the things too to understand is this committee was not beholden to the school boards. It wasn't beholden to any group other than unto itself. And although there's a lot of school board members on this committee, one of the things that the committee has decided is we want to present this and give it to the voters for town meeting, because it would have been really nice if we had started 6 months earlier. We could have done it at the election in November, because that's usually your greatest turnout. I think all your town clerks will say, especially a presidential election year, you have the best turnout, because we wanted to get as much feedback from the populace as we could, and that's how we get it, is by you voting, saying yes or no. And we then said, town meeting is your next best time to get the most people to come out and vote. So we really wanted to make sure that it was available for you at town meeting to vote on this. And then the second part of it is the committee has not made does not have a recommendation. We were trying to present to you what we found in our study and try to give you the pros and cons. I know there was we sent out a one-page sheet to talk about the pros and cons, and it was not meant to be sent out to say vote yes or vote no. It was to try to give you some facts that we found during the study. And I know it got a little confusing. We had a lot of people wordsmithing it and people looking at it, but it said that we wanted to make sure that you had the chance to vote on it. And we ask that you vote on it, and please, whether you want it or don't want it, please just come out and vote. And that's going to help give all of us, especially all of the school boards. If you vote no, that will help us guide us where we go next. And if you vote yes, it will help guide the new board where they go. So, and just so you know, the Dover board voted and discussed and decided not to make a recommendation either. We just want to try to present what we found to you folks, answer your questions, and as a former selectman used to always say, the voters are always right. And you'll tell us what's right.
Hi, yeah.
I just want to let you know that the voting in Wardsboro is all day. So we keep saying that at town meeting, but the voting on the articles of agreement, for example, in Wardsboro will be from 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. So even if you're not able to go to town meeting, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
One of the requirements is that all three towns vote at the same time and have the same amount of opportunity for voting. Those of you that have been in town for a long time, Randy and Vicki may remember it, is several years ago we actually looked at a merger with Windham and Wilmington. And one of the agreements we had for that was we were all going to vote on it at the same time. We all had the same night set up for a meeting. We were all supposed to vote. And Wilmington and Windham kind of pulled the carpet out from under us and said, oh, we're not going to vote yet. We're going to see what the other towns do. So that pretty much decided it. Some people got up and said, if they're not going to vote and not going to follow that agreement, we don't want to do this. So that is one of the requirements. We all vote at the same time. So you know, it's not going to affect the other towns' votes.
Was that the end of the?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now if we have questions on that, that's the green paper?
Yep. Anybody else?
They're getting tired, Rich.
No. Vicki had questions.
I had a question. I'll wait till after this. Anyway.
Well, did you want to, is it on this topic?
No, I didn't write it down. Just give me when Richard was speaking to us.
So, are you worried about how this whole process in new school district will be affected by possible new federal mandates that may occur?
Wait, can you say that again? Sorry.
Are you worried about how this whole process in new school district will be affected by possible new federal mandates that may occur?
No, because whether we do it as a 3-town district or we'll have to do it as a 1-town district. And maybe some mandates might be easier, larger, or some mandates might have been easier if we were smaller. Yeah, that's a tough one because we don't know what they are.
What do you see being different in regards to operation if the merger occurs? How do you see greater opportunities occurring?
You know, in difference, you may not see a whole lot of difference. There's still going to be 3 buildings. There's still going to be learning going on in all 3 buildings. You know, it may, in the first few years, you may see no difference at all, or depending on what the new board decides with input from all you folks, you may see some huge differences. You may see that we don't do any more testing. You may see that we test every minute. I mean, it's going to be up to that new board. But I think everybody should have a chance to kind of weigh in
The
on
question
that.
was more of, since you've done this, do you see any? I know that you can't really make recommendations unless you happen to be on the board, but in your data, sharing what Marlboro does and what Dover does and what, have you guys seen anything that, hey, we might be able to pick this up? Have you been able to realize, because I'm not against anybody, I'm not hearing a sell yet.
You're not hearing what?
I'm not hearing a sell. I'm not hearing good or bad things. I'm just hearing plain data. I'm wondering what else you've taken away from the data, like, hey, here's something here's a good thing that we can get from this.
One of the things, as I said early on, is Dover increased our test scores and did a lot of work through a certain process. Wardsboro increased their test scores and had through a whole totally different process, because we had an educational issue, they had a behavioral issue. So if we ever wind up having a behavioral issue, they've already reinvented the wheel. Marlboro does a lot of the similar stuff to IB, they just don't call it IB. They have a lot of their education, a lot of their programming is very similar to what you see in an IB school. So they've been doing a lot of that already, so some of that stuff's already, they've already experimented with it. So what we see, I mean, if I was benevolent dictator, I don't think you'd see a whole huge change in the first few years. I think what we would do is be working together with all 3 districts and seeing how do we take the best from every school and what's unique about every school and use that where it's available, but maybe have all schools be just a little bit different too, enough that maybe Marlboro will be the art school and they'll have more time devoted to music than they do in the other 2 buildings, but the other building, maybe one has more foreign language time. But they'd all be similar. But again, that's...
Speaking from, I'm not on the school board, and I've never been on the school board, so my take on this was more thinking about its effect on the community, on each of our communities, and the way we hold our schools as the center of our communities. And I'm not going to say pro or con, but think about that. Think about what happens to your community if it becomes a unified board. And I think it does make a difference.
I just wanted to add to that too. I think one of the things that was most enjoyable, I think, for most of us was when we got to meet the principals from all 3 of the schools and really learn what was happening at our the next town over, essentially, and how they were approaching it and the ways they were teaching their children and that kind of stuff. That was the most interesting to me. I'm not on the school board either, but it was nice to hear different approaches and just the idea of speaking to other board members and from other towns, I think, is a benefit right in and of itself. At least it was for me when we went through that process.
As far as parents coming out, percentage-wise, it sounds like Marlboro had the most people kind of hoping to understand that. Is that true?
I think it was partly because we have this big decision to make about 7 years of age, which is major for us.
Dover and Wardsboro are very comparable in attendance.
I remember in the meetings there was some discussion, particularly with the consultant, about population trends going down, down, down. Is there going to be yet another threshold at some point where the state or whoever is going to come back and say, well, 416 kids isn't enough, you're going to have to merge your mergers?
We're not going based on number of students, we're going based on consolidation of districts. So again, there was all these thresholds. So one of the things we could have done is we could have combined, if we could combine 4 districts, we can become a side. If we can, or you have to combine at least 2 or more districts. If you combine 4 districts, you can be kind of a standalone thing. If you have 900 students, we could be a standalone. There's all different thresholds. It's very confusing. If you really want to see it, you go to the website. They have all the different types of mergers. And the other thing is just, again, one of the things the state has said is that, the number, and the numbers show it, pupils in the state are declining. There was, when Act 60 started, they used to say even though there's 108 students or 105,000 students, you know, we're gonna make it, when we do our weighted average daily membership, this made-up number, how we get 0.88 students or 0.35 students. You know, they said that we're gonna have this level of 100,000. Now we're down to 80, 90-something thousand, 80, upper 80s, lower 90s.
Mid-80s, I think.
One thing that's happened is Dover this year had a 10-student increase. So our weighted average daily membership's up 10. We have no phantom students, haven't for a few years. Our numbers are increasing. Marlboro has no phantom students. Their numbers are staying pretty steady. I don't think you had an increase this year. I think it stayed the same. Wardsboro has had phantom students, and they're 6.88. So they have shown a decline in enrollment. Now, why are we increasing? Is it the Hermitage Club? Is it the increase at Mount Snow? Is it our education? There's all sorts of maybe different things. Like, there's nothing we can firmly say this is the big reason why. But who knows if that's going to stay? We may increase, we may double in size in the next couple years. We may start losing students again. You know, historically, we always had this ebb and flow. When Vermont Yankee used to shut down and they would do refueling, we'd have this huge increase because a lot of people would rent units in Dover while they were refueling. Then when the refueling ended, we would go down a little bit. You know, we've had, when Mount Snow's been sold, we've had some down spirals and up spirals. So we don't know, and it's hard to predict. Like I say at town meeting, if I could tell what was going to happen a year and a half down the road, I wouldn't be here. I'd be playing the futures market.
Is there any other criteria that the state required other than consolidating school districts? In other words, you're saying that it's not based on savings, the cost saving, but more, you know, ability of having more opportunity for students. Have they set any other criteria, in other words, to say, well, actually, your students aren't receiving any more benefit now that you're merged, so do it over, or you need to look? Or is
No,
it just
there is something new this year where the state will go, the Board of Ed, the Department of Education going around reviewing schools, looking at your performances, and they can, if we don't perform at a certain level, going back to No Child Left Behind, the state can come in and take over your school, and I think it's done it to a couple schools in Vermont. But right now, you know, that's not an issue with any of our schools. Our schools are all performing well. You know, some of the things, the criteria they're looking at, you know, is how are your students performing on their testing? How is your special ed costs going? You know, or how are you dealing with those issues? You know, Windham Central just received a fairly large grant for a company to come in and look at our special ed throughout the district, and we're hoping that's going to give us some help and some information, and maybe even save some more money. But, you know, again, not having a crystal ball, you know, next year the legislature can completely change, and they could say that, you know, somebody said earlier, well, maybe 2,000 students should be the new number. But again, we're a rural state. You know, they have to recognize that. I think Laura was saying there's a bill to have one district in the entire state.
There's a study.
Study
To have one. Your question about opportunity, are there other criteria? I mean, Act 46 is really about right sizing. The school districts throughout the state to try and have more equitable opportunities for all of the kids. But it's not, you know, Dover's been pushing for years and years and years, you know, what are we buying? And you know, there are things that are in place because of that are happening because of that. You know, we've got common chart of accounts coming through, you know, these quality standard review teams, which is what Rich was just talking about. But that's not the basis for Act 46.
And I just to jump back to your question, Anita, everybody should understand that all of this is predicated on Windham Central Supervisory Union remaining more or less intact. We have worked fabulously well together over the years relative to other districts. And somebody else pointed this out earlier. A lot of the collaboration that Act 46 is envisioning and requesting has already been going on here for years. So if any of these happen, let's say there's a side-by-side created between Wardsboro and Dover and an alternative structure envisioned by Marlboro, they would all be a part of Windham Central Supervisory Union. So the number of students isn't just 416, but it's Windham Central plus the 416 that these towns represent. There's no loss of some of the collaborative effort that's already been going on over the years.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering to clarify the loss, those maybe short-term loss that might happen for schools or towns if people vote no. So they'll lose their small school grants, and will they be otherwise hit on by the state?
Well, Marlboro is the one who's most in jeopardy because of that.
Yeah, I saw those numbers.
They say that if you are geographically isolated, you will not lose your small schools grant if you apply for an alternative structure. They have yet to define geographic isolation. In 2011, Marlboro was considered to be geographically isolated. There's been no update to that. There's a potential that we would not lose the small schools grant. We don't have phantom students, as Randy pointed out, so there wouldn't be any loss of those things there. We wouldn't get the 864 incentives.
So they wouldn't lose anything more?
No, probably not. But I mean, again, this is all just coming out now. Revised draft rules for alternative structures came out again a couple of days ago, further defining some of the questions that you're getting at there. But that's, your question are specific to Marlboro. If Marlboro votes no and then comes back within the ensuing year, which it's capable of doing, it's allowed to do, as Selena pointed out earlier, any work that had been done by the merged board would be taking place without Marlboro being technically represented on that board. But so that would be a disadvantage for Marlboro as well.
The other thing too is there's a $150,000 merger grant too. And you know, one of the concerns is if we choose not to, and the state of Vermont says, okay, well, we're redistricting everybody and here you're now a district.
You don't get that grant.
We don't get that grant either. And that's a pretty good chunk of change. And there's actually been some districts that found that they weren't able to form their new district, but that was not enough money. But those were also larger districts and more boards and more groups being combined.
The reason I asked the question is, you know, socially, I think it's a great idea for the towns to work together and all of the potential offerings that could come from that with great minds all working together. Not doing it, I feel like it'd be a big money loss to schools, Marlboro the most, but I wouldn't want Dover to lose their small school grants and other incentives.
But you know, and again, one of the things is we're not recommending yes or no, but one of the things that frustrates, Vicki and I a few years ago went up and testified before Senate Ed, and we talked about, as Dan was saying, Windham Central has really led the way. And just meetings I've gone to in Brattleboro and other towns south and north, you know, we talked about, we share our band, instrumental music teacher. There's no way that Townsend and Marlboro and all these different towns could afford a band and an instrumental music instructor. And there's nobody who would do it for, you know, a part-time here and a couple hours there. But by Windham Central using this model called the agency fund, what we do is we hire him through Windham Central, and then each town pays their share of his cost based on the amount they use him. So Dover uses them for 1 day a week, so we pay 20% of his salary benefits. And we were talking about this, and the people looked at us like we had 3 heads, and you know, like they started making a cross sign and trying to get away from us. And it was really, you know, we've been doing this stuff for years. We've been doing really well. It's the same frustration that Twin Valley's seeing. Hey, we already combined. We put Wilmington, we merged Wilmington and Whitingham, and now you want us to do more. You know.
But I think, just to jump back to the social fabric that you were talking about before, I don't think anybody contests that it's going to be diminished if we don't have our votes at our town meeting and our discussion amongst the people who live in the town in which the school sits. I don't think anybody questions that. It's going to be different. It would be different. I shouldn't say it's going to be different. I should say it would be different if, in fact, the towns merged.
Different, sure, but not necessarily better or worse.
Well, you know, what does town meeting mean to you? It means different things to different people.
Can I ask for?
Well, I had somebody had me.
Richard, so, you're well-respected in town, you always lead us and tell us what to do, and I'm not expecting you to answer this tonight. I do want an answer tomorrow night at pre-town meeting.
You won't
I
get
do
it.
want an answer, because this town always looks to you for guidance on this, and the board, and to say, we're not gonna make a stand on this. I think that's a mistake, and I think that the way that we always do business in this town is we take recommendations from the board, and in particular you. And so tomorrow night at pre-town meeting, I really want to know how the board stands on this, because that's not how we usually do things in Dover.
Yeah.
And I really have a problem
I've
with
had
that.
this discussion, and just personally, and I really don't know. I can be very honest with you, I don't know how I'm gonna vote. I was hoping for a bigger turnout, I was hoping for more input from Dover voters. We've had bigger turnouts in Wardsboro. I don't know what that means. I don't know if people have already decided, I don't know what they've decided, whether yes or no. And I really hope that, I'd love to see 150 people come tomorrow night to the pre-town meeting and really tell us how they feel. And I would hope that you folks would tell us how you feel tonight, because again, I really don't know how I'm gonna vote. I can be very honest.
And I gotta
because
say
what-
too, that Marlboro's board is not gonna be taking a stance on it, so I don't know that it's quite fair to put the Dover
Well,
board in
that's
that.
how we run our town meeting. Usually, the board stands up, tells us, this is what the best way to do things, and so it seems very odd not to have any true
And the
direction.
reason I'm saying that is because I don't, there's so many unknowns out there, Vicki. You know, I mean, I can say honestly to Dover voters that the 78,000 or the 61,000 small school grant will be a big hit. I can say the loss of, in the future, possibility of that continuing on and on, it will just kind of grow. I can say that if we get forced into a merger and we have to do something without that $150,000 merger grant, without that other money, just the 6 Phantom students in Wardsboro is worth close to $100,000. You know, but then again, I can't predict what the legislature's gonna do. They may say, hey, look, your alternative structure, this makes sense, and we're gonna let you keep that money. I wish I had a crystal ball, I really do, so I don't know. And just remember too, like on the Burton question, the paying the tuition, the board just gave some facts and we did not take a stand on that one. And again, this one, I really don't know where to go, but you got 2 other board members too, if they'd like to weigh in.
Actually, we had a question.
This was a brief follow-up for informational. With the small schools grant, losing it if we don't do the merger now. If we go in that next year and come up with an alternative structure that's approved, do we still sacrifice that intervening year's small school grant?
The small school, or no, we'll still, the small school grant, I believe, stays until that date when the state will either say, we're gonna accept your this is where we're gonna place you, or we're gonna accept your alternative structure.
2019.
Right.
2019.
Actually, the state will come out with its statewide plan in
2018.
November of 2018.
Okay.
I'm sorry, June 1 of 2018. And then, of course, there'll be some wrangling, but by 2019, it's all going to be said and done. So really, you got about 18 months.
So what happens is the voluntary, July 1st, June 30th, the voluntary stuff is all over. You either done a voluntary merger or you haven't. After July 1st, that's when alternative structures will start being looked at, and that's when the Department of Education will start looking at the statewide map and start redrawing districts. They have 6 months they make a presentation to the state board.
July 1st of 2018.
Right.
November 1st of this year, alternative structures
Will have to be
proposals will have to be in.
But to be clear, we could theoretically pursue an alternative, vote no now, pursue an alternative structure, get it approved, and not give up the small school grant.
No.
We don't know.
I believe
No.
that we will still have a small school grant for this coming year.
Yeah, no, I know.
There'll be a small school grant for the budget you vote on next year, if the legislature doesn't change it, but every year following that, there may not be. An alternative structure doesn't guarantee you the small school grant. A merger does guarantee you the small school grant. And it's no longer a small school grant, it's called a merger grant.
You know, the other interesting thing is, just like you said, Jason, you could vote this down, we could prepare an alternative proposal. That alternative proposal very well could be exactly what we have here already. Because the state is going to look at Dover and Wardsboro and say, you guys are a fit, you're going to have to dance together anyway. So we could lose a lot and potentially gain nothing new by doing it. And that's just one scenario. As Rich said, nobody knows how it's going to play out. But even under the revised alternative structure rules, which are just draft, the state still holds all the cards. And the best way that I see at this point to keep as much control as you can is to go ahead and approve this thing. That's just my own personal view at this point. And you still don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I know you guys have already made the decision, but I have to agree wholeheartedly with what Vicky said. And I know it's probably too late in the process for all you board members or whatever that are up there to change your mind, because you have been, I don't know how long, months, years, studying this, looking at this, where now you're throwing it out to the public for a very short time where we're gathering it. So you have a lot more knowledge of the ins and outs of this whole process than the rest of us do. And you guys are elected to guide us and hold your decisions, and your thoughts very highly. So just to reiterate what Vicky said, maybe it's too late that all the other board members maybe try to change your mind, but I would really like to see a recommendation from everybody, actually, which way to go with this.
So I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so I'm happy to tell you what I think. I don't know how I'm going to vote yet, Randy.
Okay.
I think that there are communities in Vermont where this process is critical. There are kids that are not getting good quality education. I think this process, painful, sloppy, uncomfortable as it is, was the administration, the legislature's way of trying to allow there to be a measure of local control and realigning and seeing if we could fix what's wrong in terms of districts. Dover's not one of those districts. Wardsboro's not one of those districts. Marlboro's not one of those districts. Declining enrollment is a problem with our current education financing mechanism. And so that's hurting, that is starting to hurt. That will hurt Wardsboro's budget. For me, I feel good about this process. I wish we were able to bring more specifics to all of the towns. I have to do nothing except commend Rich Warner, who has for 2 years shepherded not only this Dover board, but the whole Windham Central Supervisory Union, plus this merger study committee through this process. And this is one of the most difficult districts and areas of the state. And he has done an incredible job. I wish we had more time so that we could come up with more specifics for you. I wish we could tell you, here's what it's going to look like on day one. I think that's a fair question to ask. I think that the people in these towns, they're good people. You've got good boards. We all believe in high quality education. I think, we're going to make a decision. We're either going to go together or we're not, and I think we're going to be okay. We're going to take care of each other and figure out the next steps either way. I don't know what's going to happen with the state. I think there will be some changes, but I think they will be based on where it makes sense. Did you combine where it made sense, where it was easier to do it? And I think there's a question here. I think there's a question. So.
Can we also, do you want to leave? Because he's the other one.
Yeah, I will. With the understanding that I am not speaking as a member of the Act 46 committee up here, nor am I speaking as a school board member for, Dover. I'm speaking as an individual citizen who's going to go into that voting booth and close the curtain behind me. I'm going to vote for the merger. But I'm voting for the merger more, I think, not out of protest, but out of frustration with Montpelier just shoving stuff down our throats again. And I feel that with the merger, I, as a local resident and as someone who has a child in the school district, I maintain some control over the future of my school district and what we're going to be doing. Whereas if the merger doesn't go through, we've lost control of it. And I really don't know what some faceless bureaucrat
sitting up in Montpelier is going to decide. They may decide that merging with Wardsboro and Marlboro is the best decision, and then there's some financial implications. They may also decide that Dover has to merge with Twin Valley. And I guess I would like to be part of the process, making the decisions of the future of the Dover School District and the future of my daughter's education, as opposed to having somebody 2.5 hours north in Montpelier making that decision for me.
And as an aside to that too, although the state can't change structure, so they can't force a merger with Marlboro if we all voted no, they've also said that contiguous is not a requirement. So they could say, hey, Vernon, Dover, Wardsboro, and I don't know who else.
Westminster, maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I think
another
K
K
through
through 6, they
six.
could say, hey, this is your new district.
Yeah.
But I think also our former superintendent, Steve John, said this at Marlboro the other night. He said he doesn't believe that people should vote on fear. These decisions should not be made out of fear. And I would like to echo that and say I would like to vote on them out of hope. So what would I hope would happen? That doesn't give you guidance, yes or no, but rather than fear, that's a terrible way to run a democracy.
Now it's your turn, I swear.
Okay, real quick. So one of the carrots, for lack of a better word, seems to be the small school grants or the merger grant. Is if we merge, we get it, we're safe. Is there any talk of axing that down the road, that in 3 years, oh, hey, everyone's consolidated, we don't, I mean.
Okay, so I have some bad news for you, which is the legislature goes into session every year.
Yeah.
So that's a question every year.
Right. I mean.
And I would also say to you, Josh, that, the small schools grant, when that was put in, it was really meant to compensate for some of the scale problems that Act 60 actually created. So in removing the small schools grant, I think we're going to have some constitutional issues if there are schools that remain. I've introduced and keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the House Education Chair, this notion of rural weighting. They're very hesitant, I think, to pick it up because they want the schools, the small schools that can come together to work together to do so. And again, I think that's why we're not seeing much in the way of, I think we're going to see changes after town meeting, some changes after town meeting based on what happens and what's left and what's needed. So I think that's an ongoing and open question.
For Dover, is having the IB program a possibility of having an alternative structure based purely on that?
I really believe that Dover is the poster child for an alternative structure because of the IB program, because of our performance in testing over the last few years. There's a whole myriad of reasons. We're very financially well off. We have a lot of support from the voters, as Vicki mentioned. But again, it comes with the loss of money. But again, the voters will tell us, because how we vote on town meeting will determine where the current Dover board goes to. If this is voted down, we will meet with Windham Central and figure out where Windham Central is going, but Dover will also have to decide where they want to go to protect our interests.
Can I ask Laura this? So if there are a lot of no votes, does it get more attention in Montpelier?
I would say that there's a lot of attention right now in Montpelier. I think there are a lot of communities that are struggling. There are a lot of places where it's not easy. And I think there's a lot of resistance at the same time in our education committees to doing anything right now to change things. They really want to see, as much as possible get done before they make changes. So I think there's already a lot of attention in Montpelier. If there's a lot of no votes, what happens? All right, let's play that out. So if there's a lot of no votes, what happens? Well, we have most of the larger districts in the state have already merged. many of them have done so thinking that there will be some tax savings. It's been my experience. I don't think they're going to say, oh, okay, well, nobody else has to do it. I also sit on the VSBA board. That's definitely not what I hear around the table. There's going to have to be adjustments and tweaks. There's not going to be a repeal. There could be more time, who knows? But, I think what these communities have done is really safeguarded themselves by doing, good work, dedicated work for a long time. So I think we're in good shape.
And if anybody wants to look up Senate Education Committee proposed legislation, just look it up. It comes out every day or 2 days. Another one just came out in the last day or two. VSBA, which Laura sits on the board of, has done a legislative review of it, and you could go to any of those sites and you'd see what's being proposed for expanding or changing the ways in which districts could merge.
I would also say Senator Ballant, who's the Windham County Senator, is the vice chair now of Senate Education. She will be coming with me to Wardsboro and Dover at town meeting. So you can ask her questions.
The small school
Grant.
thank you. Is that something specific that covers in each individual, for example, for Dover, does that cover something specifically, or is it just in general covers your budget?
No, it's added into the budget. Okay. But for the last several years, it's kind of been a teacher. I mean, the amount we get is kind of equated to what it costs us to have a teacher, a classroom teacher, not a...
And then if you voted no and the state is saying, okay, well, you're going to, Dover, you're going to merge with this particular school, your school district, you're talking about what we're doing now, not necessarily, okay, Dover, we're going to close your school, you're going to go to Wardsboro, you're going to become one school, or,
Well, and that's a really good point. So something that came up during our articles, we submitted preliminary articles to the state. So one of the things we have in our articles is that no school can be closed in any of the towns, no building, unless you have both the vote of the majority of the board plus the vote of the electorate of that town. And the state wanted us to take that out. They said it's okay to have a 2 or 3 or 4 year limit, but you're tying the hands of a new board. And we're like, no, we think this is a deal breaker. Could you imagine if we said, hey, Marlboro, Wardsboro, Dover, we could possibly close you by the other towns voting for it. And they did not like that, but we kept that in there. Not only that, but then we wrote it into the ballot, because if it's on the ballot, it's even more confirmed that, yes, this is what people wanted. And we even got pushback that it shouldn't appear on the ballot. So we did make it on the ballot, and we're saying it, yeah, that is really important to us. So if we vote no, and then the state makes us into a district, we don't get that. I mean, that we're going to follow their rules, not the kind of the structure that we put together.
Yeah, and those rules are in the draft rules, and they're much more watered down than what you guys will be voting on next week. They basically leave it up to the board, the new board, to vote to close the school. They don't give the towns say. They give the board the option.
so that's one major difference right now between agreeing, at least you're providing
Yeah,
that.
that's a safeguard.
Wardsboro and continues individual schools.
I think Wardsboro has a lot to lose with that. I mean, if we lose all the small school grant, the phantom students, and the tax incentives, and then our school enrollment goes down, and we're in a bind in Wardsboro. And then if we join, then we at least we have control. We still have control over our schools closing and staying open, which we want to keep.
You get a question over there. Oni.
I just reconfirming that's absolutely clear. So we maintain control as much as is unknown about everything coming down, so you can barely make a decision because you have no idea what the other guy's going to do. We maintain control of not closing any one of our schools should we choose to join now, or we surrender all that control if we don't.
But
not necessarily.
And there's still time to revisit things.
Okay.
One of the issues I have is, I've always said this, is out of all the schools in Windham Central, Dover will be the last school closed. And I'll tell you why. We're the only brick and mortar elementary school in the district. We're on town sewer. There's not another school, including Leland Gray, that has a town sewer. We have a very good water system, and I've always said, and you guys will laugh, but remember, I got in a lot of trouble with emergency management when I didn't have a flood plan for the Dover School in case the Dover School flooded. And I said, if Dover School has to worry about flooding, there's a lot worse issues that we have to worry about than whether we're gonna get the kids home, because there ain't gonna be no homes. So.
But Marlboro does have some groovy purple paint on their building.
Yeah.
It's really like that.
And there's some bricks there too.
Yeah, but again,
No more.
with this whole thing, Dover School building was constructed for about 230 students. There's more than that in the 3 districts. There's no way we're gonna close all 3 schools. And I would never see closing, you know, again, benevolent dictator, you would never close Wardsboro, because you can't have kindergarten, 3, 4-year-olds riding a bus for half an hour, 40 minutes, because there's no bus driver, they don't get hazard enough pay, and no bus driver's gonna be able to drive the kids that long. And young students need to be close to their parents, so that, you know, if they have an accident or something happens, you know, that the parents can get there in a reasonable amount of time. You can't be shipping a child to Brattleboro. And it's funny, Dan and I were just talking, a little sidebar, and we went up and got to talk to the senators up in Rockingham. Randy went up and testified, and one of the things I said to them afterwards, because I didn't know I had to sign up to speak on a different topic, is that, you know, they've talked about the number of students, the number of districts, but the one thing they've never talked about is geography, because you gotta remember, Vermont's a very rural state, and although it works great in Chittenden County, because you got 900 students in Burlington, so they can be their own district, you know, to get 900 students in the spine, you know, like from Whitingham, probably there's 900 students from Reedsboro up to Wardsboro, including Marlboro, and that's probably it. And that can't be a district. That would be an impossible district, because it's just so far spread.
Tell me about it.
So I said, you know, you need that third leg. It needs to be geography. And remember that, you know, although when you look at the map on the table, it looks pretty flat. And you've driven to Marlboro on Route 9 when you get just a little bit of snow, you know. Bobby once told me that he's glad he didn't have to be responsible for Route 9. 100 is bad enough, huh?
One of the names we considered for the district was connected by dirt roads, but that didn't make the final cut.
I just want to point people, while I'm blinding everyone up there, so this is our website, if no one's been to it before, this is what it looks like. The top bar here is the web address, wcsu-committee.blogspot.com. There's all of our articles of agreement are on here, all of the questions from previous meetings that we've had are written up and answered on here. If you want to ask another question, you click this fancy button right here, and it brings you to a spot where you can ask a question right there, and it gets submitted to Anita, who then passes it along to us at the board. So there's lots of info here. So if you go home tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning, just wake up and
Watch the video, you go back to sleep.
yeah. You know, there's the slideshows here. There's tons. You know, all of the videos are here from BCTV. Lots and lots of stuff here. So if you get home tonight and you can't go to sleep, you can watch one of the, you know, the meeting from January 19th. It was amazing.
That's good.
Brandy, one of your points was we've been doing this for 2 years. The one thing that Laura really pushed hard for is Windham Central started meeting right after this became law, and we wanted to see it Windham Central. We had really good turnout. We had almost 100% participation from all the districts but Stratton. And we kind of looked at where we were going and what would be the best solution for Windham Central. And we spent over a year on that. And all those meetings are available on the Windham Central site. So although you're kind of late into it, we have tried to make sure that we talk to people and let people know about it. And that's why we hired Anita to do some public relations, and it's been on websites and
So you
stuff.
go to WCSU right here from our blog spot and go watch all of the ones from last year.
And the Act 46 link is on there, so anything you have, you guys all know how to get hold of us, call us. And I had one question.
Just for Wardsboro, do you have a sense from your meetings if your voters, because it seems like it's Wardsboro and Dover that are the ones that need to make this.
They're a lot like you guys. They really aren't.
I'm just wondering if you have a sense.
Yeah, they're a lot like you guys, not really giving us much direction. I really don't know. I can't get the pulse. I don't know, Dan, how you feel. And Dan's on the board. But,
Mike.
Mike, sorry, Mike.
That might.
Dan's over there. Different board.
We've done this.
Yeah, I've done it before. Anyway, we're not
Sorry, I'll
really
still
getting
give
a
you a ride
consent. I know. Not really getting a consent. Are you from the board?
I do not, no. Or from the board either, board or the town. Like Rich said, we had a few more people come out, but about 30 at each meeting. And I don't know which way it's gonna go.
They just sat and listened, like, and asked questions.
But one of their random students is swimming from the lake, I see every year.
We do ours Monday night. The school board does the, so I think that's gonna be our 4th meeting. So we'll see what that is, and then, you know, questions can come on Tuesday as well.
So I want to ask you guys all a question now. So I'm going to throw it right back at y'all. What do you guys think, please? If anybody would like to weigh in, I mean, what are you thinking? How do you think you may vote? Or
I will, because I think I said it also before you, just in private, that to me, right off the bat, I mean, I'd hate to say that, you know, the superintendent here said, don't vote in fear. Well, knowing what Vermont does, or lack of thereof, and how they throw things, I think that's how a lot of people are going to vote. Because right now, you're going to have a known against an unknown. Unless you really like to gamble, I think you're going to find a lot of people going with the known compared to the unknown. And I know I just spoke out, but I think you're going to find that at a lot of your town meetings, and while you guys are sitting up there at your town meeting describing this as a board, just what Vicki said and I said, what does all your citizens do every year? They go on the recommendation of your board. And if you've had, I think, a small, you know, I don't know where I'm looking for, you know, attendance at these meetings, I think you're going to find out that that's probably the reason why, is because, you know what, maybe they don't want to come out. They're going to go on the recommendation of your board, and you guys aren't going to make that recommendation. And now you're going to have some people that are going to go, oh crap, what do I do?
I think we'll have a level balance.
Yep.
I think the people are not really that informed. And even if you are informed, it's hard to know what.
I'm sorry,
Even if you are informed, it's hard to know how to vote. I mean, Randy and I fight about this every day.
Well, we don't fight.
Passion discussion. Stop it having any argument.
You know, I know I'm a little pessimistic when I look at this stuff, but one of the things I use a lot in my job where I counsel people is, this to me feels a little bit like being on the Titanic, where we're sinking anyway, but at least pick a seat that you can at least enjoy the view. And this to me feels like we're going to vote yes, so at least we can control some of the money, but I don't get the feeling that anybody likes this. And I know someone once said this feels like a gun to the head, and you had a great objection to that, so I'm not going to bring that up again, but to me, the only concrete thing we have is, if we say yes, we can keep our money. We don't really know what our opportunities are, although we all have great, schools, and we can learn from one another, but honestly, I think we can learn from one another whether we merge or not. It's just we're forced, if we merge, we're going to learn from each other because now we're coworkers. I'm not, and it's not your job, you've been very clear about that, but I'm not hearing a great sell. I'm not hearing, Dover has, and because it's not the job. And that's,
It's not as clear here. It is very, very, very clear, even within the district that I represent, the discrepancies that there are, the differences that there are in opportunities for kids. In some places, it is very, very clear that there's going to be an improvement for kids. And that is the thing, believe it or not, that the education committees talked about extensively before Act 46, was making a difference for kids. You know, it's not as clear here. And, you know, that you're going to see a dramatic improvement. You know, it's clear that we may have a more stable structure for the long haul. We may have a more stable structure.
Hey, Josh, I maybe you've heard this before because I said it at the last meeting. This is kind of like doing a real estate transaction in reverse. First, we wrote this purchase and sales agreement. Then we got approval from the bank, which is essentially the state, and now we're trying to get somebody to buy this damn thing. But we're also not really hard selling it because you guys have to make that decision, and there are serious pros and cons to both directions, and it's hard to say what is the right way to go.
In a way, Marlboro's in a better position because we can take this extra year.
We could take that year too.
You could take this year. But
No,
No, you
no,
can't.
it's a little
You
different. We can
Well, we
take.
can repetition, or we can do it.
you have 30
Right,
days to.
but
30
if we
days.
don't do something by July 1st, the understanding is those grants go away. So we could take a few months, but we don't have a year.
Were necessary.
Months for an alternate structure.
To November 1st,
or to
November 1st,
repetition.
alternative structure.
Maybe after town meeting, there's more clarity from the.
And just for
What
clear-
Rand had-
clarity,
no,
did
let's-
Dover look for an
wait.
alternative structure?
But, Andy, he had his hand up before you, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
It's okay, Andy could go, just.
What was I gonna say?
You froze it.
I have to say, I think that you're right. I think, Rich, to your question, I think that the board would be able to make a recommendation at town meeting if they wanted to. I think I agree with your decision not to as a voter. I like the fact that that you're presenting facts and alternatives and not an opinion. I like the way you did it tonight, where you allowed individual members to speak their mind. I think that's appropriate and more helpful to me as a voter. If you're looking for what we think, I think I agree more or less with Chip in that I'll be voting yes unless a lot changes between now and then. I like what Dwight said at the last meeting about the opportunities. The folks I've heard from, not a lot. Since then, parents who have put kids through school around here, the opportunity to maybe find a better fit in Marlboro or Wardsboro, if that's appropriate for their child, that opportunity is valuable. I think it's a small community, and as wonderful as that is, that there are limiting things to think about there, and this would help with that. But if I were you, I wouldn't make a recommendation as a board and let pillars of the community and stand up and speak their piece at town meeting, or maybe write an editorial or something.
Already promised that.
If Dover votes no, we have the ability to come back if we have a percentage of the elected of a new vote. But also we can look to become an alternative structure under whatever definition, just Dover alone.
Or again, it gets
Or
convoluted.
potentially again. as-
Dover and Wardsboro could say, hey, look, let's come up with a new game plan.
Okay.
If the Leland and Gray towns, what are you guys feeling from Leland and Gray area?
What'd you say?
The Leland and Gray group, what's gone on with their meetings? What's the feeling? Is that gonna fly or not?
Who knows, but I just was thinking about giving this board some feedback from being from Windham.
Can we do this? Can we hold that for a second? And we said we were gonna get done at 8:30. Some people have to drive through Marlboro and it's really muddy. I would love, I'll stay and talk to you guys as long as you wanna talk, but I think to allow other people to leave, you wanna do a closing and then.
I just wanted to quickly say, I got a note from a member of the audience saying, thank you for all of your hard work. It's a great service to us and the kids. And I just thought that should be on record. So now, I guess we can say we're officially over. So if anybody feels like they want to leave, but anyone who wants to stay and continue the conversation certainly is welcome to.